We are told in this article published on July 28th, 2020. Here, Zach, if you want to show this article briefly. J.K. Rowling and the White Supremacist History of Biological Sex. This article tells it's going to be speaking to. So did you show it and I've taken it down now, Zach?
Yes.
Okay, good. A quotation. An online friend of mine, a person who is trans, forwarded this to me and said, "Would you please address this in your next live stream?" And so we are going to do it just very briefly. You haven't read the piece, but you can imagine what's in there. So I'm gonna have a couple of quotes here.
Certainly has a tantalizing title.
Oh, so tantalizing! J.K. Rowling and the White Supremacist History of Biological Sex. So one quotation from it is, as many people are engaging in conversations about how white supremacy has shaped so many of our political and social institutions, there is no better time than the present to talk about how biological sex and sexual difference were created over time to protect, promote, and police the boundaries of whiteness. That is a quotation. Created. Biological sex was created over time to protect, promote, and police the boundaries of whiteness. Boy, this article is a crackpot mess. It's a crackpot mess of misunderstandings about evolutionary theory, again, always, right? Always, and illogical conflations. Let's deal with a couple of them. It conflates the veracity of an idea with the wrong think of people who've stood near that idea. It's a classic bait and switch move, right? And it happens all the time in evolution. People misunderstand or want to appropriate a bad understanding of evolutionary thinking and claim it as their own and conclude stupid, illogical, racist, sexist, whatever it is, conclusions. And then people who want, therefore, to believe that anything evolutionary is racist, sexist, whatever, say, aha, those people over there, they said that they're doing what you're doing. To which we could say, but they're not. They're wrong. They're confused. They're bad. Like, that's not what they're doing. The fact that stupid people or wrong-minded people stand next to ideas doesn't make those adjacent ideas wrong. This just seems so obvious, and yet we deal with this all the time. Okay, so here's a quote from the article. Darwin and his followers argued that all human peoples were related, but it was said that different races were on different scales or stages. All human beings were now to be viewed and judged as being on a racialized continuum where intelligence, beauty, morality, fecundity, and physical ability increased as one moved up evolutionary stages. Of course, the white Europeans who formulated these theories considered themselves the most advanced. So that's some 19th century bullshit misunderstanding of what Darwin said, and it's not what evolutionary biology is. It's not how evolution works. It's not about stages. It's not about hierarchies.
Well, I want to push back just slightly.
Yep.
There is a hierarchy in paleontology that describes a move from basically familial units up through civilization. So before you get to a tribal system, you get to
in anthropology, you mean then?
Yeah, paleoanthropology.
Oh, okay.
That you have a headman system. Anyway, there is a progression.
There's hierarchy within populations for sure,
right?
And within
this was understood in Darwin's time by Darwin. In other words, there is some stuff that you have to read in the context of the level of understanding that existed when Darwin was writing. On the other hand, there was also a awareness that is now caricatured out of existence, that even to the extent that there was some sort of understanding that hunter-gatherers were in some way primitive, there was no sense that inherently meant that they weren't headed towards civilization and finding themselves in a different stage. So anyway, I don't want to dwell in the 19th century,
right? No,
in order to sort it out.
That's the big flaw here, right?
Yeah, but anyway, the point is, look, you could do a sober analysis here of what they had right and what they had wrong, and what persists and what doesn't, and all of that. Or you can go verificationist.
We're not arguing that all people are equivalent, or all cultures are equivalent, or as good at doing everything that other cultures are doing. Nope, not true. Not true at all. And there are those who would argue that. And therefore, our claim that some people in some cultures are better at doing some things than other people in other cultures are doing would claim that in itself was the same thing as this racist garbage, when it's not, right? And in fact, okay, so just one other thing this article does. It discusses an idea, again, from 19th century race garbage that I hadn't even heard before. I thought I'd heard all the stupid things that emerged from supposedly, evolutionary thinking. But apparently, high degrees of sexual dimorphism in humans was supposed to be an indicator of a more evolved race. Which is, so, and the person writing the article doesn't know what they're doing. They're completely clueless. And so they actually seem to claim the opposite, but you go look at the link and it's like, oh, okay. So, these people in the 19th century who were trying to use science to justify their racist conclusions came up with this. They found that, they found evidence that Europeans had more sexual dimorphism, that men and women are more different in Europeans than in other races. They were talking about indicators just all across the board. It seems not just height, I don't think. But it's, again, the fact that there have been confused racists who spin their fantasies in the language of science does not make the science racist, right? The fact that you have an idea that is taken and used to some end that is not okay does not make the idea itself not okay. Those aren't the same thing. So, again, the whole article is this. Actually, what I've written here is it's a verificationist mess. It is that. It's a verificationist mess of motivated reasoning and sloppy thinking. But it's also true. So I kind of threw up my hands. Like this is some, let's see, what is he? The author of this article is a PhD candidate in political science and also a student in feminist studies. So he can't get it right. That's higher ed for you at the moment. That's terrible, and we've talked about that a lot. But I wanted to actually just use this as a segue to quickly say something about, again, that even scientists are hiding behind this kind of logic now, and some of them actually seem to believe it. So a friend of a friend, a biologist friend, recently shared his biologist friend's claim that everything is a social construct. And this guy, this former, I think, friend of a friend, literally uses the fact that there is no single definition of species that works for all species to then claim that both math and sex are social constructs. So I'm gonna repeat that. Because there is no single definition of species that works for all species, the unspoken connector here is all biological constructs categories are the same, therefore math is a social construct, and sex is a social construct, and gender is a social construct, and everything's a social construct. So I responded to my friend who shared this. This guy's a biologist? Are you kidding me? Like, to conflate the lack of a universal species concept with the lack of any firmly definable categories in the world is to abandon the idea of an objective universe. Like, this guy doesn't get to call himself a scientist, actually. Like, sometimes I wish I could be king for the day and take all of these PhDs away from people, because this is such a serious failure of logic. And if you are actually claiming to be a biologist who has looked at diversity of species and decided that the lack of a universal species concept is mappable onto there is no sex, that's ridiculous. You and I used to face students. You used to meet students who came from totally crap K-12 educations, who somehow have been totally confused by creationist households. And within weeks of meeting these 18-year-olds, we would disabuse them of this nonsense. And now we have PhDs in the sciences who are arguing this. It's insane. I don't think this guy would recognize a phylogeny if it hit him upside the head. And I'd kind of like to see it do it.
Watch one of these trees fall on you.
Exactly.
Yeah, so at some level,
it's such witlessness and cowardice. It's insane.
If you think that sex is a social construct, you're doing it wrong. Same goes for math.
Yeah. Good. Right. I like that. That was good. That was good. Yes.
Are you where you wanted to go with this?
Sure. Okay. I mean, I could go off for a long time.
Well,
I'm good.
Want to point out that actually all three of the characteristics that we've been playing with fit here. You've got the verificationism. You're going to go through science and you're going to find something like species ambiguity, which is real, and assume that means ambiguity is the same for every other category. That's verificationism. You have autoimmunity, where we are attacking the ability to make sense right? If you attack science by basically taking any conclusion that it would render and putting it in the same category as something problematic like species, then you are basically making it impossible to establish anything. And then there's psychosis, right? This, well, if you think about what it is like, if you've ever encountered a psychotic, right, there is a belief of a malevolent force that is attempting to manipulate and endanger, and there is license. You can categorize. It's all cops, right? It's the cops, right? They are the bad thing. And in this case, right, there is do you know what sex is? Sex is a weapon of white supremacy, right? That doesn't sound paranoid as shit to you? Because it does to me, right? That sounds like the government is sending me messages through the fillings in my teeth, and
exactly,
right? It's that level of nonsense.
What was the claim? That it is created. The concepts of biological sex and sexual difference were created over time to protect, promote, and police the boundaries of whiteness.
Right.
Like 500 million years ago, guys.
Well, let's put it this way. You can even just test that scientifically, right? You could just simply go to hunter-gatherers, non-white people, and test the question of whether or not they believe. You don't even have to ask them what they believe. You can just simply look at pairings, right? Who pairs off with whom, right? They know that sex exists, whether they use the same terminology for it that we do or not. And you can establish it scientifically.
And when it's homosexual pairings, which does happen in every culture known, do they make babies? No, they don't.
No.
Sex was not created for white supremacy.
Nor do they expect to, right? They know that those pairings don't produce babies. So the point is, you could test it scientifically. What's the next move? That scientific concept you are using to establish that this is not a tool of white supremacy is itself white supremacy. So of course it would conclude that, right? So the point is, okay,
gotcha.
Right? Exactly.
Did you know?
It's a hermetically sealed psychotic box
into which they want us all to go.
Right. What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong?